Welcome to the Thunderstock Show, collection of valuable brainstorms to enhance your life, liberty, and pursuit of property. Today's special guest is John E. Richards. John, you're calling out from Utah, other side of the country. Glad to hear it. Thanks for making the time today. How are you doing?
Great. Thanks for having me. And yep, I'm from Provo, Utah, and at the foothills of the Rockies. There you go.
Beautiful landscape. John, you have quite a diverse and varied background as an entrepreneur, venture investor, mentor, and educator. What was the first step? And what I mean by that is when you were growing up, is what you've been doing in your career what you had planned from an early age? Or
No, I actually wanted to be a doctor, medical doctor, a surgeon. And so I all through college, that's what it was until my senior year. And then after being accepted to medical school, I decided not to go to medical school. And in my senior year, I snuck into a bunch of business classes. I was a chemistry major and rediscovered my love for entrepreneurship and business. As a kid, I was quite the entrepreneur doing lots of different things and enjoyed the business side more than actually the activities that the business side was supporting. So that was quite an interesting revelation for me to make that change. And so I went to school out of state, actually down here in Utah, and went back to my hometown of Seattle and got involved in the Yellow Pages industry, a really lucrative industry at the time. I'm fairly old, so I go way back, and it was the dawn or the era of when the phone company called AT&T, the original Alexander Graham Bell company, got
mm,
divested into 8 separate companies because of its monopoly. Federal government broke it up, and that made it easier to compete against the monolithic phone company. And one of their arms of business was Yellow Pages, unregulated and the most profitable piece of the phone company. And so the competitive or independent Yellow Page industry flourished after that 1984 breakup of what we call Ma Bell. And so I went into the Yellow Page industry as a publisher and spent about a dozen years in it. And it was very successful, very lucrative. And then the rest of history you didn't ask about, but that's what happened to me. So
wow.
that got me into entrepreneurship and being an entrepreneur, and there you go.
So the breakup of the Bell Atlantic or the AT&T conglomerate as it's known today. I have
Yeah,
a
Bell
quick
Atlantic was one of the 8 companies that AT&T was broken into. What we call AT&T today is actually just Southwestern Bell, one of those 8 companies that bought the trademark later and all that. It's just fascinating. But
I have a quick story on that topic, and the reason I probably said Bell Atlantic is because of this story. So, growing up, my father moved 14 times in 15 years because my grandfather was an officer in the US military. Well,
wow.
common thing. When my father got into high school, though, I think the family decided, all right, it's done. 27 years in the military, like let's put some roots down. Move back home to central Pennsylvania, where my grandmother was from, because rural Iowa wasn't it once you have that kind of experience. So my grandfather became the GM of Bell Atlantic. Had 500 employees in his mid 30s, and at one point, the union tried to burn his house down while my father was there. So
Oh,
interesting experience. After that, then my grandfather's went into entrepreneurial things, and I came from an entrepreneurial family. But that is my one crazy family story about that conglomerate. So I think you and I are probably both glad that it went the way it did.
yeah, there you go. Interesting.
Very
So,
cool.
yeah.
So I will ask you though,
Hmm.
you said you were involved in entrepreneurial things before your medical path, and then at the end
Yeah.
of it, you're like, I'm going to go back towards entrepreneurial. What were some of the first businesses that you started?
As a little kid, whatever age, I mean, I used to charge a nickel to kids in my neighborhood to rent a book for my house. So like they wanted to read or get a book and like a for-profit library. I ran a basketball league in my neighborhood and charged entry fees for teams to be in it. And I played in the league too, but I had more fun putting out a newsletter and counting the money and showing how much money was in the account for the league and um, bike racing club, just all sorts of different things along those lines. Actually, also ran a casino in my basement in high school, little different things like that.
Oh man. Yeah, not your typical lemonade stand. I think yours are a bit
Yeah.
more
I did lots
exciting
of
and fun.
lemonade stands too. Yep.
They were part of it. That's cool. So, in terms of moving forward in the timeline, so what are some of the bigger plays or really exciting entrepreneurial ventures you took after that sort of corporate experience and that break apart with what's now AT&T?
Well, I wasn't part of AT&T. That just happened while I was
Mm-hmm.
finishing my education. So I graduated in 1985. That happened in 1984. And when I decided not to go to medical school, there were just lots of opportunities to compete in these lucrative markets. So, um, getting basically went to Seattle and did a print shop, but discovered that publishing is better than printing. Printing's a tough, tough business. You make a mistake, you got to eat the paper costs and redo things for customers. Publishing Yellow Pages is like publish, there's no editorial content. It's a book of ads. And so you
Mm,
publish a book of ads and deliver it, and the ads are expensive, but they really work. And before the internet, the way we discovered things about people and companies, how do we find information on a person or a company, was looking it up in a book called The White Pages and the Yellow Pages. And it was very lucrative industry, very high profit. The phone companies, Yellow Pages, would run at 50% net profits. We ran at about 25% net profits. And so very, very profitable companies. And then I did that for about a dozen years, and I was very innovative. Went from black ink on yellow paper to start printing on white paper with multiple colors and doing full 4-color ads, adding different features that way ahead of what the phone company was doing. The independent publishers just were much more innovative and at lower cost, good results, innovative product. But my real big thing that happened was in 1994, a fellow walked into our place of business. He was wearing all black clothing, a black turtleneck, a young hipster, and told me that I'm going to be out of business in 2 years. And I go, why is that? Because there's this thing called the internet, and that has gone commercial, and you can do ads on it. And I said, the internet, that thing for scientists and universities? And he goes, yeah, an attorney just did what we would now call spam, an email blast that got him lots of cases, and it showed that you could advertise by sending out emails to lots of people, and then um, as I explored that, then the word came out that Mark Andreessen, a student at the University of Illinois, had created Mosaic, the turning port 80 of the internet from a text base to a graphical user interface with the web browser. And so that was interesting news. And then all of a sudden you're saying, okay, well, now we can do graphical things. And so in 1995, launched the first ever internet Yellow Pages. And so I put my Yellow Page publications, the database, and made it searchable up on the internet through a website. And people went gaga over it. I debuted it at a Bill Gates sponsored trade show in Seattle called Online Advantage. And I kind of did it as an experiment. And then I took it offline for 9 months. And then September 1995, actually launched not just my books, but I had talked to many other publishers to put their books online through my portal. And so the Internet Yellow Pages was born. And that company, I had 10 major companies want to buy my fledgling no revenue Internet Yellow Pages company. And these were like Microsoft, for the Baby Bells, and others. I spent more time with Microsoft, who was in my backyard up in Seattle, and
right.
they about after about 9 to 12 months of talking to Microsoft, three Microsoft employees contacted me and said, don't sell to Microsoft, merge in with us. We just left Microsoft 30 days ago to do white pages, but from the information you've been sharing, we know that yellow page is where the money's at, and we can do that. And so that's what I did. I sold my print company, went all in on the internet, and merged in with them. And that company was InfoSpace. 2.5 years later, went from just a handful of us to 1,500 employees and public on the NASDAQ, and it was the quintessential .com ride. And that's the career path I had up until 2001 when I retired from InfoSpace and then became an educator at my alma mater and moved to Utah and got super involved as an angel investor in the fledgling Utah venture market, which for the last 20 years, 25 years now almost, I guess 23 years, it's been on fire and I've ridden that as a venture investor. That's my background.
All right, so there's so many questions. I'm going to try my best not to go down every rabbit hole off of that
Okay.
story. So first question, you're now at your alma mater at BYU, right? Brigham Young?
No, I left there. I stayed 12 years there from 2000 to 2013
Hmm.
and left there for a little segue. I had a I helped the mayor of Provo, Utah sell a fiber network it had built, and they didn't know what to do with it. And so they asked me to help figure that out. And I said, let's sell it to Google, who had just started a division called Google Fiber. And lo and behold, that's what happened. And Google came in and had no presence in Utah, bought this fiber network, and then turned around and asked me to be head of operations for Google in Utah. And the mayor and Google kind of teamed up on me, and I ended up saying I'd do it for a year, but they said, no, you got to do it for 2 years. So for 2 years, I was a Googler. So that was it.
Okay.
And then after that, uh, I instead of going back to university, I started my own boot camp for entrepreneurs, kind of like my own um, like a mini university for entrepreneurs, and that's been going for 10 years now, and I still do that. So, and there you
So,
go.
all right. So, two pattern recognition trends that I'm seeing in your story so far. Number one, someone shows up at your doorstep and the picture that's kind of painted is almost ominous, like the man in black saying your business will die. And then that was a catalyst for you to be like, this could be a sign. And then you made a IPO several years later. So pattern recognition, like future thinking, being open opportunities, check. And then look, there's a very huge popular trend nowadays that's what I would almost consider not quite competition for higher ed, but online learning and consortiums. And you were doing that well over a decade ago on your own platform. There's platforms like Mighty Networks and school.com, if you're familiar. So you were an originator of those types of things 10 years prior. So how do you maybe how is not the right question, but what is it about your view of the world and the marketplace that enables you to identify these opportunities and say, I'm going to make this leap where others haven't left before?
Yeah, I think it boils down to a little, probably one of the hallmarks of an entrepreneur is what level of tolerance of risk does the individual have. So one of the traits and all the traits that lead to successful entrepreneurship, some can be inherent, but all of them can be learned. And risk tolerance goes up when you have taken risks and it's been successful. Your risk tolerance dramatically increases, and then you can take more and more risks because you believe that it will turn out well. And so, so risk tolerance is kind of a really important trait to have. So in the instance of the black man in black coming in and telling me this, I had actually been the chairman of the new technology committee in two different yellow page trade associations.
Mm.
And so my job was kind of watching for disruptive technologies that would impact the print industry. And there were lots of attempts in the past to do so, and some of them turned into small revenue centers for yellow page publishers and things. But when I learned and looked at the internet. And then when Mosaic by Mark Andreessen, which turned into Netscape, which gave birth to the dawn of the internet era, when it went public, and the ability to have a website with graphical user interface capability, obviously, Yellow Pages is just a database printed once a year in a book. But if you could have a live living database that's constantly updated and you can search it at a computer or terminal, that's very powerful. Like inside my Yellow Pages company, our Yellow Pages database of thousands and thousands and thousands of businesses as a publisher, I could always turn to my computer terminal at my company, search for a business and find its address, phone number instantly, because that's what I did, because I had an internal company system, obviously, to publish yellow pages. But when I heard about the internet, I said, so basically everybody someday will have a device that they can look up any information they want and get it instantly, like I do, because I'm in the Yellow Pages business as an executive. But the average Joe at home will be able to look up this same Yellow Page information just as easy as I do with my internal computer systems of my company. I said that is now the threat. And I actually said back in the day, whenever they have a persistent, always on, high speed device connected to the internet, the print Yellow Pages is going to be seriously threatened. Obviously, it even went farther than that. Even though I did really well with the concept of internet yellow pages, that got eclipsed later by the advent of search. And so Alta Vista, and then of course Google also even threatened the few years that internet yellow pages was a hot commodity, because Google search, or the search, web crawlers and search engines, eclipse the utility of a yellow page. But going back to your pattern recognition, I recognized that this disruptive event was going to threaten a 25+ billion-dollar yellow pages advertising industry. And so I knew I needed to explore that and could be an early player in that. And that's what I did. On the other um, example, about education, I want to clarify. I started a live boot camp. So the boot camp was held in person
Mm.
and it was not online. But now that when you say that, I've been asked for years to go online, but I didn't want to just take my live boot camp and put it up online and just slap videos up of me on stage teaching and things like that. So it's interesting. You say, and actually school.com, I think, has roots here in Utah, but a lot of the different, I've been watching for years, all the different ways to do courses. The problem with online courses is that the completion rate for online courses industry wide across all online courses is 3%. So
Three.
3%. So it's not I didn't want to just slap up a course or slap up some videos and call it a course. But the funny thing is I'm weeks away from launching Startup Ignition Academy, different than our Startup Ignition Bootcamp, which is a live in-person bootcamp. Startup Ignition Academy is actually an online experience with this curriculum and learnings and teachings. But it wasn't until the advent of AI in May of 2023 that I said, oh, I think we can now do something that's game changing and really helpful to entrepreneurs that will literally change the game. And so we've been working on it for a while, and we're imminent to launch. It's called Startup Ignition Academy, and it's uh, AI is making the process of lean startup and launching ventures, which used to take weeks and months to do the validation work for your business model and a bunch of other things I could talk about. But
Mhm.
that now is being shrunk down to maybe even hours and days because of the help that AI can do all of the drudgery work that entrepreneurs used to have to do in a very manual way. So it's really fascinating, and I'm excited about it. I wasn't excited just to slap, cheap and dirty videos up and try to
Right.
call it a course. Now we have real tools that are doing the dirty, hard, drudgery work, leaving the human brain of the entrepreneur to do the creative decision making that really sets their venture apart. And it's fun. Anyway, that's a long story, but
No,
that's
that's a
I
great story.
clarify that. Yeah.
Yeah. So another question I had, recognizing patterns is it almost seems like you've done a great job, whether intentionally or inadvertently, being in the right place at the right time. And what I mean by that is, you're approached by people from Microsoft and you're living in Seattle. So it's like, oh, great, they're in your backyard, you know. With where you're at with Utah, and there's the advent, like for example, you just said school has roots there too, and the Google Fiber. So what advice do you have to entrepreneurs? I think a lot of people with the advent on the internet think that they can, oh, as long as I'm on the internet, then it doesn't matter my location. But what, if any, advice or insight do you have on physical geographical location, the importance of it in someone's entrepreneurial journey?
Sure, I'll answer that. I want to go back and just say comment too on pattern recognition. I work extensively with my son, who, in his own right, had created a company and sold it and became independently wealthy. And he always says that I have strong pattern recognition. That's what he notices. And I've studied the brain and things like that a little bit. As we age, we get better and better pattern recognition, even though our synapses fire slower. Like you're much younger than me, so your brain fires faster at the neurons and the synapses of that. But I have experience and pattern recognition, which allows me to be able to compete with you in tasks, right? Because my pattern recognition, I can see the first couple steps and instantly know what the intermediate steps are and get to the finish line fast because of pattern recognition, which is fascinating. You've used that term a few times, and that's a real hallmark. So when with the experience I have, I do see and spent so much time in early stage entrepreneurship and venture that I can do pattern recognition. So that's what helps. Back to the importance of geographic location, networking is really important. The number one most valuable activity in the field of business that a human can be doing at any moment in time is negotiating. You can earn more money negotiating in 5 minutes than you can earn in a lifetime. And so you need to put yourself in the situations where you're negotiating as much as possible. That's negotiating with investors, with employees, with coworkers, with co-founders, with suppliers, with customers. And negotiating is where you gain ground and create wealth more than any other activity. And so that means you have to deal with humans and be with humans and interact with humans. And I am worried about the coming generations that are trying to avoid human interaction and aren't comfortable with human interaction, aren't comfortable with selling, with talking to people and negotiating because it can feel awkward if you're not used to it. And so, literally, I think it's important that we develop those skills of human to human contact. So, networking and meeting people is important. So, geographic location, if you're in a place where you get lots of opportunities to go out to events and interact and network and meet up, etc., then things are just going to happen for you. So, a lot of people say luck is just when preparation meets opportunity. So, the job you're if you want to have more success, you got to increase the collisions you have in life with other people. And actually, great business ideas aren't just one person coming up with this grandiose idea. It's actually over time, multiple people's hunches combining together to form a great idea. And that can't happen if you're not interacting with people. So being in tech hubs like Silicon Valley, Seattle, Utah, Austin, Texas, all these places where there's unending events and opportunities to collide is really important. You can obviously, in a digital world, have some collisions online, but it's not going to be the same as a human interaction where you're in the same room with a person and can sit down and meet somebody. Most of human communication is uh, oral, non-verbal. In other words, it's about 70% um, visual, and where literally it's the what facial expression, like during the COVID era when we wore masks, it was really difficult because you could not tell what the words meant a lot of times what people were saying because you did not see the facial expression accompanying the words coming out of their mouth. So you didn't know if it was sarcastic, if it was whatever. I mean, it's just we humans get a lot from facial expression, and that's like about 70% of communication. About another 23%, according to what I've read about, is in the tone of the auditory. So when, saying, like if you ask, hey, so are you interested in my product and I think it's a good idea? If I'm doing over the internet with a survey or text or email and the person goes, yes, there's many different types of yeses, right? For instance, if the respondent says, yeah, I think it's okay, versus yes, I want to buy that now. Are you selling it? Okay, those are
Or even
those are going
worse, I agree
to
to your terms and conditions. You check, did you read the long
yeah,
diatribe?
yeah. So the bottom line is interesting on those two yeses. in a survey or a text, those are the same responses, yes. And but if I was with the person live, I'm hearing the tone, seeing the facial expression and all that. And so that's those are important skills to, become a leader and to recognize opportunities. And I'm just saying, so it's kind of scary that some of the coming generations are very poorly practiced in these things. And I don't mean to sound like an old codger saying that. It's just that that's the answer to your question is that I was in significantly heightened entrepreneurial communities, and I was going out and meeting people in person and seeing visual and auditory cues that told me what direction to take the relationship, which you just is much slower in the sterile environment of just exchanging electrons computer to computer. Does that make
Mm.
sense?
It makes tons of sense, and I totally agree. I will also sit in your same seat of sound like the old codger when it comes to I work with plenty of Gen Z and now some Gen Alpha that are, really technologically wizards, and I found that they may have amazing um, technical skills when it comes to doing certain things, whether that be programming or leveraging artificial intelligence. But to hold eye contact even over Zoom, for example, or to, articulate their thoughts without having to interface with ChatGPT is more challenging for them than it would be for my generation,
Yeah, yeah.
especially your
Think
generation.
of think of the young person that's an incredible gamer, and that gamer actually makes them the perfect person to command a drone from Nebraska to do military things, and they're a super valuable asset. But will they ever rise to colonel or general if they don't have the people skills to actually interface with humans better? And so they might cap themselves in what they can do in their career. And that's true in business or any field of endeavor. And so when we talk about education and they use a T, they say the STEM skills of the T. So a T has a crossbar and a horizontal and a vertical bar, right? The vertical bar is the STEM, and that's why we say STEM education. That's where you learn skills, and the basic skills of math, science, and language, etc. And you know stuff like the skills of operating a video game and then operating a drone and those skills. But the soft skills, the bar across the top of a T is used as an analogy. That's the skills of how you work in a group. For instance, like I believe that universities are in crisis, but you have to go away for at least 1 year away from your home and attend a place where you're put into groups. Like when you're at a university and you are in a class and the professor says, okay, break into teams of 4 for the semester, that's a very pivotal moment in the life of a young person. Can they get on a team of 4 and interact with that team of 4 and have the develop their soft skills of working as a team, people skills, and being part of a team? And that ends up being important because 4 average IQ people in all tests always outperform a 150 plus a genius level person in decision making. So
Hmm.
the ability to be a part of a team becomes super important because that's how you are going to advance and go up. If you're a lone wolf and a genius and really skilled at a certain skill, but you do not have any soft skills, society is going to cap you. You're going to hit a ceiling and not get past it because you're not going to have those soft skills to be part of a team. And nobody's going to let you onto the upper echelons of teams unless you're a good team player and you know how to work as a team. And so it's really interesting. And some of the young people don't get that. Like right now, we're all talking about a return to meritocracy and merit, which is awesome. But again, merit will only take you so far if you don't have those soft skills. I know that's a long diatribe on the topic, but I think
It's
about this a lot.
important. It's becoming more and more with the time that we're at important. I would say 15 years ago, if you made that same comment, the soft skills were probably more taken for granted. Like, oh, well, everyone's going out and being social and this and that. But if you look at studies that show that the average, say, high school person age is spending less and less time with friends. Yeah, there's less car accidents and less underage drinking, less um, unplanned teen pregnancy.
Yeah.
Sure, like on paper, you think those are all great things, but there's a dramatic increase in suicide rate and depression and
Well,
mental health
and it's
issues.
amazing. They're lonely.
They're
Think about it.
lonely.
They're lonely, and it's interesting. Just people are lonely, and that's makes it super sad to think that a young person's growing up lonely, and because they haven't interacted and gone out and been with groups. Like, guess what the number one, I spent many years as a college professor in teaching entrepreneurship and running entrepreneurship centers and programs and competitions. What do you think the number one most common idea college students come up with? About, almost by a factor of 5 to 1 over the second most common. What do you think the general business idea they come up with and want to start a company around? What's the problem they're solving? What do you think it is?
This is a guess, right? I have
Well,
no
that's what
prior.
we were talking about would be,
Yeah, I have
yeah,
no prior. I'm just gonna guess. I think it's something that has to do with like a social event planning, whether that would be like
yeah,
a
that's
club
it.
or a function.
Exactly. It's the two, it is, how do I meet more people and what do I do Friday night? Exactly. And I mean, I can't believe the number of pitches I've heard from student entrepreneurs on these ideas. This field actually is very hard. Like working with people's calendars and getting events out and getting people to come to events is a really hard business thing to do, even with all the tools we have. Like calendaring, Google Calendar is the best solution to calendars we've had so far, but it's not perfect. Like,
Mm-mm.
how do I know about all the events going on within a 15-mile radius where I'm sitting right now in the next week and get those events and see what's good for me, what I'd like to do, and all that? It's a very tough problem to solve technologically and database wise and just business wise. So it's a really hard problem, but that's what they want to solve. They want to solve, and they also, now I'm seeing it's not dating apps or what they want to do to find the one. It's literally just group stuff. Like, how can just a group get together and go do something fun on Friday night, which also is a very hard problem to solve. But they are not even looking for having deep meaning romantic relationships, they because they're feel that's awkward, and so you can't do that. So there's just a lot of lonely young people that is so different. I mean, when I was a kid, I went out and disappeared for hours running around the neighborhood with my friends. And I learned how group dynamics and who was the alpha and beta person in the group and how you negotiated things. And and was member of sports teams and bike racing teams and things like that.
Right.
And was in group things already. And it's just interesting. So my point is that and this all has an impact on entrepreneurship and different things because, for instance, 90% of all litigation and problems in the field of entrepreneurship is actually co-founder to co-founder problems. 1/3 to 1/2 of all startup teams implode very early because of infighting amongst co-founders. And co-founder to co-founder is where you get, if there's any kind of success and problems, it's highly likely there's going to be co-founders suing other co-founders. It's just, I mean, we've seen it from the Facebook story of the social
I
network,
was
right?
just about to mention Mark
Between
Zuckerberg with,
Winklevoss and the Zuckerberg,
yeah,
right? But that happens all the time, and I see it all the time. And it's just, again, being able to work with others in a group environment and understand that, four humans pulling in the same direction instead of pulling in the opposite direction can accomplish great things together. And how do you make it work? And also fear of missing out and greed and human emotions at play. All these things come in when you're immature on those issues and affect entrepreneurship. So we could talk for hours on these topics, but anyway, those are kind of the ways I see the world and those topics. I'll let you keep going.
one topic that I want to ask questions on, and I think that you made mention about how your son started a business and made an exit and became independently wealthy. Um, I'm very heavy on the impact and appreciative of the impact of family. So both the one that I was born into and how I grew up, the older I get, the more I'm grateful and thankful for the situation that I had with my family being there, but also starting my own. So the catalyst for me starting this business and exiting from the private equity firm I co-founded was being in the delivery room for my first child only, hopefully get more soon, and realizing that this is not, my I don't want to say risk tolerance, but my ambitions and goals completely changed when I became a father. So speaking from my own experience, I have found that the greatest interpersonal or relational strength I can drive from is my role as a husband and father. What are some ways that being a family person yourself have, because you were an entrepreneur before you had kids, obviously you had the different businesses as a child, but
Mhm.
what are some of the ways that family changed your worldview and how you make decisions in business?
Um, well, when I got married, I think I always had a pretty high level of ambition. But when I got married and then had the first child, it's just, and I was young, married very young and had a baby very quickly. And just a sense of responsibility. And my wife and I, even though, we were married in the 80s, actually while I was going to school still, um, we have a very traditional 1950s, 1960s like relationship, which is harder to make happen right now. Definitely, she could be a corporate executive if she wanted to. She's absolutely amazing, a super mom, a super wife, and super supportive and all that, and could do anything she put her mind to. But we as a partnership, I was going out making the money, building companies, and she was taking care of the home front mostly. And, I might look like a spoiled man and a kept man by a woman who takes care of so much of the home side, but that worked for us and we're super happy. We've been married 42 years and we love every minute of life. And I have 4 kids and 8 grandchildren. And just a month ago, we came back from all 17 of us being in Mexico on a vacation. They all still like to hang around me. They all live within 20 minutes of me. It's really fun. And so, but the perspective for me was just a heightened sense of responsibility. And not every couple is going to operate like we operated. So you just find what you and your spouse, how your puzzle pieces fit together, and then maximize based on that. So whatever the roles each of you decide to fill, ours is pretty extreme in terms of the responsibilities and a traditional viewpoint. And that allowed me to thrive in the business world and her to, along with me, literally, we look like, the Leave It to Beaver type of environment, right? And, but it worked for us and it's not for everybody. And it shouldn't be imprinted and forced on anybody. But at the same time, there was a huge amount of advantages in doing it because I could just put in that much more effort and time and get ahead in the work and business world. And she was a built-in marriage manual, though. Like one of the things I had to figure out halfway through my career was, and she sat me down one time and says, "John, okay, you cannot come home late for dinner. The
Mm,
most important thing we can do is have dinner together." So she taught me the 2 most important things that we need that would keep our marriage and family sane with a heavy pursuit of entrepreneurship. And the number one thing was dinner together. So she said I would leave in the morning and I'd say I'd be home for dinner. And many, many times I'd come at 7, 8, 9, 10 and not be there for dinner. And she goes, these kids get hungry around 4 to 5. And at 5, they're dying. And the latest I can get them to work is 6 for
mm,
dinner. You have to be home for dinner. You have to be there as the father and have family dinner together and then spend time reading to them and with me, get them down to bed and read them stories and get them into bed by 8 to 9. So that time period from 6 to 8 or 6 to 8:30 or so is sacred and you can't violate it anymore. And so we sat down and worked it out. And I realized how important that was. And I started coming home at 5:45 and I learned how to manage expectations in the business world and how to manage expectations at home. And so instead of waltzing in at 7, making her disappointed with a cold dinner and all that, I walked in at 5:45 and she thought I was a hero and we had dinner. I read the kids stories, helped get them into baths and into bed, and that bonded me with the kids. That made her super, super happy, and she was super happy with that. And that's what we did. Now, one way to make that work was I can't have an hour and a half commute to work either, making that work. So one of the other second critical things learned is wherever we're living has to be close. So my entire entrepreneurial career, except for an 18-month period, I lived within a few miles of where my work office was. So
Hmm.
if I need to go back to work at 9 or 10 p.m. after the kids were down to bed, I could go do that.
Right.
And so and that was really interesting. The 18 months that I didn't do that in the middle of my career was when that company that, went public. It was in the Seattle area is a lot of bad traffic. I lived in
Right.
West Seattle and the company's headquarters was on the east side. It was only 13 miles, but it was a 1 hour, 45-minute commute, literally for 13 miles as the crow flies to during rush hour. So I started having to go in later, like at 10 a.m. and coming back at 8 p.m. And that was after we had already decided how to conduct ourselves. But it was such an incredible opportunity. Then she, at 18 months into it, my wife said, we either sell the house and move close over there, and we had built our dream home,
Mm.
or you quit. And I go, I'm not going to quit. This company's going to go public. That's not how it's going to work. So we sold our dream home and moved close to the other
Jo-
business and
I
fixed
have to
everything.
make an observation.
Yeah.
You talked about the importance of negotiation. You married one hell of a negotiator. You know,
Yeah. No, no. Hey, if mama ain't happy, nobody is happy. That's an old
I hear
saying.
that.
And that's just how our life worked. Like I said, and I want this to be clear to all your listeners and viewers, is that um a traditional, I guess there's some, I don't know much about it. I've heard of this trad wife movement where women are taking more pride in being a traditional wife
Hmm.
in the old-fashioned way. But that's not for everybody. And that shouldn't be for everybody. My mother, my parents got divorced when I was 8. My mother had not a money to buy food the month after the divorce, and she lifted herself up by bootstraps, started a company, and became a very successful woman entrepreneur. And so for me, I'm used to women working and being in the workforce. I grew up with no problems with that and thought that was completely normal. So I don't have this, bad viewpoint. It's just that for my wife and I, we found a place that worked really well, and it's where it's at. But you're right. My wife, when she's super sharp, and so when she sits me down and says, it's time to talk, here's the issues, here's how it's going, and she's, I hate to say this, she's right about 95% of the time. So there you go.
It's a true partnership. Love to hear it. Yeah, one thing I've noticed, John, and this is such a refreshing conversation to me because I think at the forefront of what I do and some, core value to me is just making sure the family is never forgotten and always included in decisions as they pertain to life and business, right? It's not a unilateral decision over here. But I've interviewed so many people that on paper have accumulated fortunes and massive success in business, but then their children are estranged and they don't want to talk to them, or they've been divorced 3 times.
Lost their family. Yep.
And I'm like, you know what? If that's what you ultimately really wanted to do, then that's great. But what I want to do is to do both, right? Is to be
Yeah.
as successful like as I can financially. But at the end of the day, if I have 8 grandkids that all want to spend time with me, that to me, it's hard to put a cost
No, and
measurable
you
on
give
it.
up a lot of satisfaction in life. Right now, my greatest joys in life are my grandchildren. Through my children too, but the grandchildren, it's as good as everybody says. When I had my first grandchild and I was at the hospital and I heard the cry, and all of a sudden an overwhelming feeling, there's another person on earth I love as much as my own children. And I wasn't, everybody talks about that, but when it happens to you, all of a sudden you just go, oh my gosh. And it's almost feels more pure because I don't have to do two hard things, which is
You can give them back.
the discipline and worrying about them as their behavior, and like going to a restaurant as a parent and your kid misbehaves and you're mortified,
Hmm.
you feel so embarrassed. Okay, but as a grandparent you think it's cute. And when you see the parents discipline the kids too harshly, you
Mm.
say, why are you being so harsh? I could have been a harsh discipliner, right? But as a grandparent, you say, why are you so harsh? They're just being a kid. Just let them
Mm.
be. And it's just so funny the difference in the grandparenting. But that's a lot of joy in life, and that's really true. So, but in my boot camp, Uh, my first thing I stay in a 3-day intensive boot camp experience. I say over the next 3 days, you're going to learn knowledge and gain skills that is going to help you create wealth because we're going to focus not on lifestyle businesses, but scalable ventures that create wealth for stakeholders. But more than half of the people I've mentored to do that, and it's been many, have lost their families.
Mm,
And I want to say right here, right now, if that happens to you, you can't come back and say, I destroyed your family by helping you become wealthy.
sure.
And so you can do it and keep your family. And I want you to know there's people that do that all the time, but I also see lots of havoc. People when they
Because
become
you've
wealthy,
done it, John. You can speak
yeah,
from experience.
yeah, and when they become wealthy, they lose their way in terms of thinking, I'm all that, look at what I did. And during the climb up the hill, they didn't pay attention enough. And then when they got to the summit, all of a sudden they realize they don't know their spouse and kids. And
Mm,
then they're now feeling I'm all that because I've arrived here, and they get weird thinking I've got to go to the next exploratory part of my life and explore all these weird things. And that takes my, there's just a lot of things that happen in the climb up the hill. And then and I'll tell you right now, getting to the summit is not nearly as rewarding as the feeling of climbing up the hill. And climbing up the hill with a wife and children that are with you is way more rewarding than doing it alone. So that's anyway how I feel about things. So,
no, I mean that's I couldn't agree more, and there's nothing else that I can say in terms of disputing it. I think in my perspective, it's indisputable. Um, I have another question for you, and
sure.
it comes back to something you said about the restaurant, how it's you don't need to discipline the grandchildren, but you do, I'm sure when they are your children, if you feel like I feel, you definitely need to make sure we course correct behavior. So what are some patterns that you've recognized in your years of mentorship and startup advisory, things like that? What are some of the, I don't want to say red flags, but common behavioral or personality characteristics, and you can even call it skills not yet learned, that if not course corrected are proved to be ruinous? And on the other side of that question, what are some of the green flags or character or behavioral traits that you're like, not a tangible thing in the P&L or the financial model, but this person has an it factor?
Okay, that's a long question with different parts. So, I'll touch first on uh, behavioral things and red flags and that sort of thing first. So, um, definitely there is a fear of missing out and greed that can overtake people in the business world and entrepreneurship that you can see. People need to realize that there is a lot of money in this world. And matter of fact, in the last during the COVID era, they more than doubled the amount of cash and currency in the world. There's so much money in the world and plenty to go around if done right. And what's interesting is you just need to be ambitious, hardworking, and a good team player and get along with others. And your chance will come. It may not come on this deal at this time with this boss or this person, but it burning bridges and behaving in ways that damage your reputation and relationships is not good. At the same time, also trying to please everybody is not good. I learned halfway through my career that being a people pleaser, trying to make everybody happy in every moment also doesn't work. And you sometimes have to be blunt, exercise tough love, and say how you really feel and how things are going to be. When I started discovering that the more direct and had more radical candor with people, the more they respected me and liked me and thought I was a better leader or colleague. That was a fascinating moment. First half of my career, I always thought I needed to make everybody happy, whether it was a meeting, a company, a team, or whatever. And that's almost impossible. And ended up making everybody actually a little ticked off. And so when I said no, when I started having radical candor and said, actually, I understand where you're coming from, but here's how it's going to be. This is how it's going to work. This is what's going to happen. You can't fix that problem. You're going to just have to deal with it. And this is how we're going to go forward. And, and the person I've had people after I started behaving with more forthrightness and how I feel and what I want, other people would come back and say, John, I like how you're so straightforward and I know where I stand with you. It's so much more pleasurable because I know what I need to do and where I stand instead of a person who's always trying to please everybody all the time in the moment. And it's like contractors. You hire a contractor to do work at your home and you say, okay, you're leaving right now. When are you going to be back and finish the job? And they want to just please you in that moment. So they tell you, I'll be back tomorrow at 9 a.m. when they know they're not going to be back for 3 days. They know it, but they don't tell you that. And then they mismanage expectations. They don't come for 3 days, and you, the customer, are super upset with them because they didn't manage expectations. If they would have just said, I can't come back for 3 days. I've had this happening and this happening. So I'm leaving now and I cannot be here tomorrow. I'll be back in 3 days and finish the job. The person said, well, that's not what I expected, but now I know what's going on. Okay. And that that takes maybe part of a lifetime to learn that. And that's been so much better. I'm known for being straightforward and tough love, but people want that. They want to know where you stand. There's a huge problem, by the way, on this in the venture ecosystem. Many investors will meet with an entrepreneur for a pitch. And the entrepreneur will come away saying, oh, I think you really liked it. I think I'll get money in 30 days from this investor. That investor in reality hated the idea and would
Mm,
never invest in it. Like I've connected many investors to many entrepreneurs, and the entrepreneur leaves the meeting thinking it was fantastic and that the investor loved it. And I was surprised by that when the entrepreneur told me that. So I contact the investor back and I go, hey, I heard you love the idea and you're thinking about investing. And they go, no, I hated it. I go, you hated it? Well, that's not how the entrepreneur left the meeting. And I go, oh no, I would never invest in that. It was terrible. And I go, well, why did the entrepreneur leave feeling that way? And I go, well, John, I'm not in the business of discouraging entrepreneurs.
mm,
And then I go, well, are you in the business of misleading entrepreneurs? Because we are the feedback mechanism, investors to entrepreneurs. When they pitch us, if we don't tell them how we really feel about something, they're not getting accurate feedback. You might be causing that entrepreneur to spend another year of his life and his life savings pursuing an idea that you could tell him based on your experience that it's terrible. And a lot of venture investors say, I can't call their baby ugly. I'm not going to do that to them, but I do. I'll tell people that's the worst idea I've ever heard of, and here's the 5 reasons why, and why you need to pivot and what you're doing now. I'm one data point. You should go talk to other people and ask them to be honest with you, and see if they agree with me.
it's the difference
Uh,
between being nice and being kind.
yes, yes,
Because being kind is when your wife says you're
yeah,
either quitting or we're moving, right?
yeah,
And being
yeah,
nice, be like, oh, it's okay. You can break the agreement we had,
yeah. Yeah, that's a very good insight. So this leads to good things. So anyway, that's just kind of I went off on kind of a tangent there on the things you were asking about what you learn or pick up. I hope I can go back and answer questions. One thing I did want to say to you is that just with course corrections in children, I was pretty swift to course correct with my children when I was a parent, and I think it made for better people. Sometimes I could have been, I'd say about 5 times I can remember that I was really tough on my kids, but they got the message that what they were doing was wrong and they shouldn't behave that way. And those
right.
are that's part of things. And same thing with employees. I mean, if an employee, coddling an employee does them no good, the company no good. If the employees done something wrong or cost the company a lot of money by a mistake, you need to train and teach and be direct in the communication. And that's good for that employee. My first time I fired somebody, I was so bad. She cried, I cried. It took 2 hours and she
Wow.
didn't like me much afterwards. Then I had a mentor train me on how to fire people properly and to do it professional, swift, and direct. And when I started firing people in 5 minutes, and handling it direct and swiftly, almost invariably they would call me back in a week or two because I would tell them it's just not a fit. I have a good hunch that 2 weeks from now you'll be happier with your new job, the next job you get, and it's just not going to happen here. So all your things are at the reception desk, and I want to thank you, and your final check's ready. Here we go. And they would call me back in a week or two and say, John, I want to thank you for what you did. that was really a good learning experience. And you're right, I'm much happier with my new job. So, but before when I would try to be nice and let them have a gentle landing, they would get ticked off.
It
So,
it's amazing. It goes back to your sentiment earlier about how, you know, if you just have a lone wolf that doesn't take into consideration the brain power of those around you. You said you hired somebody to help coach you or advise you on that, and it became much, much better. I could tell similar stories about I have some dear friends that are in HR specifically, and I was like I knew I had to fire someone, and I just made a phone call before. I was like, here's my plan. He goes, that's awful. And then he talked me through a basic talk track of like, this is how you open it. This is what you say in the meantime. Here's all your ducks in a row. Conclude this way. He's like 5, 10 minutes. And I was like, oh my gosh, like all that emotional drain
oh,
just was like,
firing people is hard, and the first time you do it is one of the worst experiences in life.
yeah, yeah,
You
I would
think being
agree.
fired is bad, but firing somebody is also bad.
Hmm. Well, we're coming up on time. John,
No
I
problem.
can't tell you how much I appreciate the conversation. It's been a blast for me. The last question I have for you is very light. It's where can people find you to learn more, whether they want to, you know, join your mentorship and your startup uh,
Ignition. Yeah.
ignition
Okay. Well,
or
let
whatever.
me tell you. So startupignition.com, and you'll see there's three manifestations of that brand. We have a pre-seed venture fund. We have a live boot camp that's held in Utah. We have people from other countries and states fly in for that. We hold that every 3 months. And then we have the Academy, which is just launching and imminent to launch. It's not fully launched, really hasn't launched, which will be a way to get our um, teachings and curriculum and help and tools without having to physically come to Utah and participate in the boot camp through an online environment. And again, it's not just slapping up videos in a course, it's much more than that. And that's about ready to launch. That's a place to do it. I'm easy to find on LinkedIn, and I always love to help people. Subject to my availability, I'll answer LinkedIn messages and answer people and deal with them. So I'm very easy to find, and I have a high capacity for helping people. I love to do it. I've had the luxury in life for the last 20 plus years of, being able to be an educator and mentor. And I mentored thousands of people in the field of entrepreneurship and new ventures. And so I love it. That's an easy way to find. And you can reach me in those ways. Very easy. Thank you.
Excellent. Everyone listening, I hope you enjoyed the show as much as I did. I don't run ads, don't ever plan to run ads in the show. The only way it grows and the only ask I have for you is to share it with a friend if you found it valuable.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.